Welcome to another episode of Demolition Worker, where we test the ultimate limits of modern mechanical power and sheer destruction. Today, we are looking at the massive train wheel axle and its suspension system, known for truly incredible structural durability. These massive steel components are specifically designed to easily carry thousands of tons of heavy cargo across vast continental distances. They are forged from special cast steel, making them some of the absolute hardest and most resilient parts ever manufactured. But today, these legendary components will face an unprecedented challenge against our exceptionally powerful, heavy-duty industrial metal crushing machine. This enormous hydraulic beast is capable of generating an unimaginable amount of extreme crushing pressure to completely obliterate solid metals. Can the mighty train axle survive this brutal mechanical encounter, or will it finally surrender to the massive hydraulic force? We begin by carefully lifting the extremely heavy steel axle using a massive industrial crane to move it into position. The thick metallic surface of the axle shines under the bright warehouse lights, displaying its completely flawless and solid construction. Slowly and deliberately, the crane lowers the huge train axle directly into the gaping jaws of the giant metal crusher. The heavy steel component finally rests securely inside the crushing chamber, waiting for the immense hydraulic pressure to be unleashed. We activate the giant machine, and the massive hydraulic cylinders immediately begin to pump thick industrial fluid through the system. The crushing jaws slowly start to close in on the solid steel axle, narrowing the empty space with terrifying precision. You can hear the deep mechanical humming of the powerful electric motors as they generate absolutely massive amounts of torque. The heavy steel teeth of the crushing machine finally make direct physical contact with the smooth surface of the axle. At this exact moment, the incredible battle between the solid train axle and the brutal hydraulic crushing machine officially begins. Initially, the thick cast steel axle easily resists the tremendous pressure, showing absolutely no visible signs of any structural damage. The machine continues to push harder, increasing the immense hydraulic pressure to incredibly high levels never seen in this facility. Suddenly, a very loud and sharp metallic creak echoes loudly through the entire warehouse, signaling the first sign of stress. The thick layer of industrial paint coating the massive steel axle slowly begins to crack and peel off the surface. This extremely satisfying visual detail clearly indicates that the solid metal underneath is finally starting to experience severe structural deformation. As the massive hydraulic pressure continues to rise steadily, the thick steel axle begins to bend slightly in the middle. The terrifying sound of screaming metal fills the air, creating a truly spectacular auditory experience for all our dedicated viewers. This intense mechanical groaning provides an absolutely perfect acoustic background, delivering a highly satisfying and unique industrial soundscape right now. We zoom in closely to carefully observe the microscopic fractures slowly forming along the heavily stressed surface of the metal. The incredibly hard cast steel is desperately trying to maintain its original shape against the overwhelmingly powerful hydraulic crushing force. However, the relentless machine does not stop, pushing its massive steel jaws even deeper into the thick body of steel. The slight bending quickly turns into a very severe curve as the structural integrity of the heavy axle completely fails. You can clearly see the immense physical tension building up inside the solid metal as it struggles to survive here. The crushing machine effortlessly demonstrates its absolute dominance, proving that no physical material can withstand its incredibly destructive mechanical power. A large piece of the thick metal surface suddenly chips off, flying rapidly across the enclosed safety chamber right now. The massive train axle, once thought to be completely indestructible, is now visibly struggling to hold itself together under pressure. The intense immense pressure reaches an absolute peak, causing the heavy steel to emit a series of extremely loud popping noises. These sharp acoustic pops clearly indicate that the internal molecular structure of the thick cast steel is rapidly breaking apart. The crushing jaws continue their slow and deadly progression, forcing the heavy steel axle into a completely unnatural bent shape. We can now see a very deep and wide crack rapidly forming directly across the center of the massive axle. The incredibly loud screaming of the tortured metal becomes almost deafening as the massive hydraulic press delivers its final strike. With a tremendously loud and explosive bang, the thick train axle finally snaps completely in half inside the crushing machine. The immense amount of stored kinetic energy is suddenly released, sending heavy metal fragments violently crashing against the safety glass. The two broken halves of the massive steel axle now rest helplessly inside the dark belly of the crushing machine. We slowly pan the camera to reveal the incredibly jagged and sharp edges of the completely destroyed solid steel component. This spectacular failure clearly demonstrates the absolutely terrifying capability of modern hydraulic engineering when pushed to its maximum operational limits. Now, we will prepare to test the heavy train suspension springs, another incredibly tough component designed for extreme shock absorption. These massive coiled steel springs are heavily engineered to absorb the tremendous impacts of fully loaded cargo trains traveling fast. The crane carefully lowers the thick suspension spring directly into the waiting jaws of our extremely hungry metal crushing beast. Once again, the powerful hydraulic pumps activate, sending massive amounts of thick pressurized fluid directly into the huge main cylinders. The heavy steel jaws slowly close around the thick metal coil, preparing to test its incredible flexibility and structural strength. The machine makes contact, and the massive suspension spring immediately begins to compress under the incredibly heavy and relentless pressure. These thick springs are specifically designed to compress, but they have never faced the overwhelming force of this hydraulic monster. The heavy steel coils are pushed completely flat against each other, completely eliminating all the empty space between the metal. The spring can no longer compress naturally, meaning the immense hydraulic pressure is now directly attacking the solid steel structure. The thick metal coils begin to bulge outward in a very unnatural way, desperately trying to escape the pushing force. A very loud metallic whine fills the entire warehouse as the incredibly tough suspension spring struggles to maintain its shape. The immense physical stress is simply too much for the thick steel, and we finally see the first critical fracture. The thick metal surface slowly tears open, revealing the bright silver interior of the highly stressed cast steel suspension component. The machine continues to push relentlessly, forcing the heavy steel coils to bend and twist into completely unrecognizable metallic shapes. Suddenly, a massive section of the thick steel spring violently shatters, sending heavy metal shrapnel flying in every single direction. The incredibly loud sound of the shattering steel echoes loudly, providing another absolutely fantastic auditory thrill for our dedicated audience. The once mighty suspension spring is now completely reduced to a sad pile of twisted and broken heavy metal fragments. We carefully reverse the massive hydraulic press, slowly pulling the heavy steel jaws away from the completely destroyed suspension spring. The operator carefully inspects the heavy damage, confirming that the thick cast steel has been completely obliterated by the machine. Next, we bring in the massive wheel hub, the incredibly thick central component that connects the heavy axle to wheels. This solid block of special cast steel is arguably the absolute toughest and most resilient part of the entire train. The crane heavily drops the massive wheel hub directly into the crushing chamber, shaking the entire machine with its weight. We activate the massive hydraulic system once again, preparing for what might be the absolutely most challenging crush of today. The heavy crushing teeth slowly descend upon the incredibly thick steel hub, making a very loud and aggressive metallic scraping. The machine pushes with all its incredible might, but the solid wheel hub initially refuses to yield to the pressure. The massive hydraulic pumps work overtime, generating an absolutely terrifying amount of extreme pressure to break this solid steel block. The entire crushing machine begins to violently shake and vibrate as it desperately fights against the incredibly tough wheel hub. We can hear the massive electric motors struggling slightly as they demand more electrical power to maintain the crushing force. Slowly but surely, the incredibly sharp steel teeth of the crusher begin to heavily bite into the solid metal surface. A massive shower of bright orange sparks suddenly erupts from the violent friction between the two incredibly hard steel surfaces. The thick wheel hub finally begins to deform, losing its perfectly round shape as the crushing machine brutally forces its way. The incredibly loud groaning of the thick metal is absolutely deafening as the massive steel block is slowly torn apart. Deep structural cracks rapidly spread across the entire surface of the massive wheel hub, signaling its totally inevitable and complete failure. The crushing machine mercilessly drives its heavy steel teeth even deeper, completely destroying the internal structural integrity of the hub. With a final, incredibly explosive crack, the massive solid steel wheel hub violently shatters into several very large and heavy pieces. The sheer mechanical power required to completely destroy such a massive block of solid steel is truly difficult to comprehend. We slowly examine the completely devastated remains of the thick train wheel hub resting quietly inside the dark crushing machine. The incredibly thick cast steel has been completely defeated, proving once again that our massive hydraulic crusher is absolutely unstoppable. Today, we have clearly witnessed the absolute pinnacle of destructive mechanical engineering, completely dominating some of the toughest materials ever. From the massive solid steel axle to the incredibly tough suspension springs, nothing could possibly survive this brutal hydraulic encounter. The incredibly satisfying sounds of screaming and shattering metal have provided a truly unforgettable industrial experience for all of us. This spectacular demonstration clearly shows that absolutely no physical structure is truly permanent when facing modern heavy-duty industrial machinery. The massive hydraulic crusher stands incredibly victorious once again, completely ready to completely obliterate whatever heavy object we bring next. We carefully sweep up the heavy, shattered metal fragments, preparing to safely recycle them into completely new and useful products. Even in absolute destruction, these incredibly strong materials will eventually find a completely new purpose in our modern industrial world. We truly hope you completely enjoyed this incredibly intense and highly satisfying demonstration of absolute mechanical power and total destruction. Please remember to carefully like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredibly exciting and highly destructive content. Thank you so much for watching Demolition Worker today, and we will definitely see you in the next exciting episode.